Will Slattery here with you, sitting in for Joe Malloy on today's Rugby Show. Joe was fit enough for football, but unfortunately had to make his exit for the second half of the day. So I got a late call up. One of the, not quite Stephen Donnellan 2011-esque, but I'm stepping into the breach for today's Rugby Show. Delighted to be joined in the studio by Ian Madigan. Ian, how are you?
Very good. Yeah, looking forward to the season officially starting or unofficially starting with Leinster-Munster this weekend.
Leinster-Munster and Ireland squad announcement for the November Internationals, which we will discuss as well. And I'm also joined by Cian Tracey on the line. Cian, how are you?
Hey Will, hey Mads, how are you getting on, lads?
Very good.
Yeah, great to have you with us. But first, a reminder that our rugby coverage on Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the Energia AIL, and as official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, and the Irish men's and women's teams. The Energia Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion, welcoming everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Guys, so much to talk about. As Ian says, Leinster-Munster Saturday does often kind of signal the starter pistol has been fired on the real serious stuff, as much as we have enjoyed the opening 3 rounds of matches. And then we have this Ireland squad announcement that only was emailed in at 4 o'clock. 34-man squad, no Joe McCarthy. Was hope he might recover from that foot injury he picked up on the Lions. That is not the case. We knew Hugo Keenan wasn't going to be there. No Calvin Nash. He picked up an injury. He played last week against Edinburgh, so it must have been at some stage in that game. And a big disappointment, no Cormac Isashuku. People might remember he finished off a beautiful try for Ulster. A Bulls guy stood in his foot, and it didn't look good at the time. And he's gone to see a specialist, so he won't be involved in the November Internationals either. Some of the headlines: Paddy McCarthy, the loosehead prop. So there's no Joe McCarthy, but at least the McCarthy family is represented. The family will still get a few good days out over November potentially, because Paddy is in as one of the loosehead props. Outside of that, there's 3 training panellists who are going to Chicago as well: Shane Bolton, Edwin Adogbo, and Brian Gleeson. You know, if you're breaking it down by province, you have 21 Leinster players of the 34, 5 Connacht, only 4 Munster players and 4 Ulster players. I think the Munster figure in particular is quite stark. I won't go through the full squad. A lot of it is kind of as you might expect. Gus McCarthy is the third hooker, along with Dan Sheehan and Ronan Kelleher. Thomas O'Hearn is in off the back of the summer tour. Ryan Baird, Tyg Byrne, Ian Henderson, James Ryan. The rest of the second row is there. Anything else? Caelan Doris is back as captain. Obviously, he missed a Lions tour with a shoulder injury. The third scrum half is Caelan Blade, along with Craig Casey and James Gibson Park. No Harry Byrne, maybe a little premature. He did only kind of have his first proper start and outing of the season against the Sharks, but he did impress. So Kieran Frawley gets in as the third out half, along with Sam Prendergast and Jack Crowley. And that's kind of some of the top lines, Keane. Anything else jumping out to you from the Ireland squad announcement?
I was wondering, were you going to let anything else for the two of us to
Sorry,
chat about?
yeah. Just want to set the scene. Yeah.
Yeah, like you mentioned there, Caelan Doris at the end, like that's obviously huge to have him back. My understanding is that he's not going to play this weekend. I wouldn't against Munster. I wouldn't imagine that he'll play the following week either. I know there's been a bit of talk that, with a couple of guys who need game time, maybe stay back. But Ireland are actually flying to Chicago next Tuesday. So they're going to spend basically 2 weeks over there in what you'd probably say is a mini pre-season, really, to try and get Andy Farrell back up to speed with the players. So I couldn't imagine that he'd leave his captain back home, or any guys that are going to realistically feature in that All Blacks game. So that's big to have him back. I know, like, generally when Ireland squads get announced, there'll be a lot of kind of crowing for who's not there rather than who is there. And just having a look at it, only 2 players who made their Ireland debuts on the summer tour are included. Now, considering I think it was 9 new caps were handed out, 6 in the Georgia game, 3 in the Portugal game. I think certainly I was expecting maybe a little bit more freshness in this squad. We're 2 years out from the World Cup. You would like to see a bit of fresh blood being brought in. The last time we were on with Joe, we were chatting about, the centres, the ageing profile there. Maybe a little disappointed that a Jude Postlethwaite, a Hugh Gavin, who made his debut on the summer tour, isn't brought in. I think a guy like Shane Bolton, in my opinion, warrants to be in the full squad, not just a development player. I think he's been brilliant for Connacht over the last year to 18 months. He was very good, albeit against poor opposition, against Portugal on the summer. Good to see Edwin Adogbo and Brian Gleeson being brought along, but realistically, they're not going to feature. So it's kind of as you were, really. I don't think there's too many shocks. Jimmy O'Brien for me actually is a big omission. he started both games at fullback on that summer tour. And, you're kind of wondering what the value of that summer tour was. And again, Mads, this is something that we discussed with Joe the last time we were on. And there's a guy who started at fullback, a position that we're kind of wondering, who is the backup to Hugo Keenan? And suddenly you play a guy in 2 tests over the summer. Now he doesn't make the squad for November. So that's a little puzzling for me as well. It feels like a missed opportunity maybe to have looked at someone else on that summer tour if Jimmy O'Brien wasn't going to be the answer going forward. So there are a few kind of top line thoughts for myself, Will.
Yeah, and it is worth mentioning, while only 2 new caps from the summer are in the squad, I think 16 players in total who played in the summer are here. So obviously it wasn't just about new caps, it was guys who were maybe only had a handful of caps who played a bit in the summer as well, who are included. The aging profile of the squad and some talking points around that, Andy Farrell was discussing it with Joe on the pod earlier in the week. We might get to in a bit, Ian, but anything kind of jumping out to you from the squad announcement today?
Yeah, I thought James Hume could have got back in. Now, Ulster have only played 2 games, but he was up against quality opposition, so that has value in it, playing against Kane Moody, and I thought he defended him particularly well, and then he showed his usual attacking flair when Ulster were in possession. Building depth behind Robbie, Gary, Bundy is going to be really important for us, especially in such an attritional position in the centre. I think Harry Byrne will feel a bit hard done by. I know it was only one good performance, but we know what Harry is capable of from his previous performances with Leinster, and he looked really good at the weekend, and will definitely put Sam Prendergast under pressure as this season goes on. I think Milne is someone who I've been really impressed with Munster, and he'll be disappointed that Paddy McCarthy's been selected ahead of him. Milne obviously got capped with Leinster ahead of McCarthy, albeit a bit older, but I think he's going to be a really important fixture in that Munster team this season, and maybe we could see him putting good performances together and making that Six Nations squad and building the depth chart out at Loosehead for Ireland.
Yeah, 2 tries on Friday night against Edinburgh, kind of those close range carries which don't always go to plan. You get held up a lot in the modern game with the rule change. Ian, like one thing that really jumps out to me, obviously Leinster-Munster this weekend, I mentioned it, 21 Leinster players, 4 Munster players. That just seems so stark when it's written down. Like you go through and maybe, Calvin Nash is injured, he possibly would have been in the squad, but maybe not. It just really hammers home, I suppose, where the 2 teams are at to some degree. It still feels very stark to me, though. I don't think the disparity is as wide as that, personally. Although the results, I think Leinster won 14-16 in the fixture, but still, that must be cause for concern for everyone. Not only Munster supporters, everyone in Ireland looking at that should be worried, I think.
No, and look, Munster have to produce their own, and one of the bright shoots there is Brian Gleeson being involved, albeit as a training player. But I think we've seen this in previous years, whether you're in there named in the official squad or you're in there as a training player, quite often we've seen these players step up, train really well and get capped or play at some part, whether it's the Six Nations or the Autumn Internationals.
Gus McCarthy, I think, was a training panellist and he ended up playing in the Autumn.
Correct. And that's where you just got to get in there and take your opportunity, impress the coaches, impress the players around you. I think Bolton is someone who could potentially play against Japan. I think we'll see that the squad heavily rotated for that game, and I don't think the coaches will have earmarked players, whether they're training panelists. Ultimately, you need to put out your best team on a given week, and it could well be those any of those 3 players. It's great to see a Dogbo back fit. We know of his potential, a real power athlete, explosive guy, and even the impact he had having been out for the guts of 2 years at the weekend, I was really impressed by.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the training cover. I don't understand why they're just not named in the squad. Like, what's the? Is there some sort of like mechanism by like which I don't you don't have to pay them the same amount of money or the same amount of travelling stipend if they're named as training panelists and just holding bags? Because I agree with you. Like Shane Bolton is like an established player. Like I don't know training cover should. I can kind of understand a Dogbo because he's hasn't played in 2 years and he's young, and Brian Gleeson is young. But someone like Shane Bolton is like in his mid-20s and has played for Connacht for a number of seasons.
Well, first of all, Will, we should be glad that Andy Farrell names his training panelists because when it was under Joe Schmidt and Ian, you were probably in plenty of these camps, there was younger lads being, brought in and out, and you'd be seeing photos of them on Sportsfile or Info or whatever it is, and you're trying to second guess who the younger guys on his radar were. So I think it's a good thing that Andy Farrell names it. To me, it's kind of it's a bit like, they're in, but they have to earn their place in the senior squad. I don't have a huge issue with that for guys like Brian Gleeson and Edwin Adogbo. I would definitely have Shane Bolton in a different category. I think to go back to Paddy McCarthy, like what a very interesting story this is. I'm going to go back to the summer tour again. He was one of only, I think it was 3 players, himself, Nathan Doak, and Stephen Smith, who were in the squad, who didn't feature in either game. And I remember asking Paul O'Connell, we were sitting in the team hotel in Lisbon, was there any reason that everyone didn't get a game? Because that was the whole idea, that they were hopeful to give everyone a game. And he just said, like, basically some guys they felt weren't ready. So there was only 3 of them there. Paddy McCarthy was one of them. So it's a big jump to go from suddenly not being ready to play against, the likes of Portugal, Georgia, albeit were better, and now all of a sudden being parachuted into the November squad ahead of guys like Milne. And I'm glad Ian mentioned him, because I think he's very unlucky. He was excellent. He has been excellent for Munster since he's joined. Paddy McCarthy was an outstanding under-20s player. While he was in school, he was more of a tight head. He's made the switch across a bit like Andrew Porter, made the switch across to do that. And he was excellent, I thought, last weekend against the Sharks. But it's a very small sample size. Now, I think his potential is enormous. He's been talked about for a while. He had a real injury hit last season, and Jack Boyle kind of stole a march in him. But the potential there is obvious. But I think for guys like Milne, who has more, he's shown more, he did well on the summer tour. I think they can feel really hard done by that. A guy who wasn't deemed ready in the summer now all of a sudden is, with only a couple of games into the new season.
And it's interesting that Andy Farrell didn't feel the need to play any sort of squad politics or provincial politics, in the sense that, like, Michael Milne went to Munster. Like, it's what you kind of want to see guys of his calibre do, to guys who are being maybe blocked by the really marquee players, to go and kind of try to play elsewhere. And he's, as I mentioned, really good against Edinburgh. But Andy Farrell doesn't pick squads like that. He, like, ultimately it's a third loose head in the squad, so it's not like it's the most key selection he'll make. But he still was willing to kind of ignore that and kind of not reward someone for doing that, and pick a guy in Paddy McCarthy who, while unbelievable against, really good against the Sharks, hasn't played as much rugby as Michael Milne, and hasn't probably done as much because even the back end of last season, Milne was good as well. Like, Farrell doesn't really select like that ever, does he?
No, he doesn't. He selects the players who he deems to be the best. I think if you look at players who have left Leinster and how their careers have gone as regards Ireland caps, there hasn't been too many success stories. I think Milne will be one that changes that. I think he can forge his way into this Irish squad because of how Munster play and how important he will be in that Munster system. He's a real power guy alongside the likes of Coombs, Gleeson, Tadhg when he's back playing. And we touched on the skill of scoring tries close to the line. That is a real skill, and he's particularly good at it. He's a nuggety guy. He reminds me of someone like Marty Moore, who, not the easiest to get at. So yeah, look, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. You say the third choice loosehead isn't the most important, but it can be the most important once you've won injury, and then that's the guy who's coming on for the last 30, 20, 15 minutes of games. That can be the deciding factor. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the big step, Cian, that you touched on there with Paddy McCarthy, he has made big strides this year, against quality South African opposition. He could see how much he was up for the fight against the Bulls, and then he showed not just that he's a good scrummager, but his ability to get over the ball and contest the breakdown, and also his ball carrying ability. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out.
One thing I want to talk to both of you about is the idea of Ireland's as an ageing squad. I know you guys were discussing this a couple of weeks ago, and obviously with Andy Farrell kind of out pushing his new book, he was talking about it as well. Joe had him on the show on Monday and kind of went through some of the ages of Ireland's key men, what they'll be in 2027. Like, Furlong will be 34, Tadhg 35, Under Fleer 34, Conan 35, Gibson Park 35, Lowe 35, Bundy 37, Ringrose 32. Basically kind of putting it to Andy Farrell, what do you do now? Like, is it, do you need to kind of pivot towards 2027 now? Are these guys going to be too old? And this is what he said.
There's always an eye on the future. The long term, the medium term, and the here and now is what we always talk about. But it is what it is. Like, it depends how the people who are pushing through, whether they're ready or not. In my experience, people who have been thrown in to teams that are not ready and on top of that, if too many of them are thrown in and they're not ready, it can have the adverse effect, as in it'll damage them. So damage limitation of how you bring people through in the right teams and how you allow them to play in good teams, I think is pretty important for them to keep on progressing and find the way and make their mistakes, etc. So there's all of that.
Yeah.
I suppose when you look at our pool of players and the size of it, it is what it is, and we bat way above our average because of the competition that we've got within that small pool. Then I'm talking about, say, South Africa or England, or I'm talking about numbers now. So you're always going to deal with that, and to go along with that, is it ever any different? Is there ever a release of pressure on any Six Nations or whatever? And every single season, there's these type of questions are posed to you, in the sense that there's always someone getting too old in somebody's eyes.
Sure.
There's always someone who's got a long-term injury, lack of form. Youngsters coming through, are they good enough? And in my opinion, the age is completely irrelevant.
The age is completely irrelevant. It's interesting because it has been a major talking point, and it's funny, we were chatting about this off air earlier, and we're kind of talking about the last World Cup, and you were kind of saying the age is one thing, but it's how the players are managed as well. Like the last World Cup, South Africa, their entire pack who won the World Cup final, who started that final, were in their 30s. Faf de Klerk was in his 30s, Damien Dialenda was in his 30s, but they rotated far more than Ireland did. 10 of Ireland's 15 players who played against New Zealand started every single game. Not a single New Zealand, South African, French or English player started all the games up to the quarterfinal, including the quarterfinal. So we did something drastically different in the last World Cup than they did. Where are you on this argument now, having heard Farrell? Do you think anything he's saying is making sense to you there, or would you still be very concerned about the age profile?
No, I'd agree with him on certain parts of it. Take the oldest of those players that we're talking about, Bundy. I'm not concerned about Bundy because he's a power athlete. I don't see his power deteriorating. I can still see him doing a really good job for Ireland at the next World Cup. But we saw on the Lions tour that when it gets to 60 minutes, he's probably not the 80-minute man that he once was. So what knock-on effect does that have for Ireland? Well, it means you probably have to go with a 6-2 split. Sorry, it takes away the 6-2 split option. You have to go 5-3 because you need to have additional centre cover. I think my gripe from the last World Cup was we played our strongest team in every game against Tonga, who we would have beaten with rotating, in my opinion. Against Scotland, we would have beaten anyone on that day. We were just on such a going day. And then we fell flat, in particular at the start of that New Zealand game, allowing them get that easy 14-point lead or whatever it was. And that's what South Africa do particularly well. Their squad was, you look at their average age, it was older, but they were fresh going into the games that mattered, and how they used the bench is, we talked to death about the bomb squad and the impact of that. So it's not that I'd be saying that some of these guys can't make it. There's a good chance that a lot of them will, but it's how they're managed leading up to that. And that's also how often they play for their club and their minutes being managed in games and trying to get them to peak for the big ones.
Yeah, Cian, it's funny because it does sound very stark when you go through some of those ages. But if you kind of break these guys down individually, Tadhg Furlong will be 34, say. It wouldn't be unusual for a tight head to still be playing really good rugby at that age. And if Ireland, say Tom Clarkson comes through, or another tight head can come through in the meantime, to kind of help share that load, Tadhg Byrne will be 35. At the same time, you've a load of good kind of 6 second row hybrids coming through the system. People didn't think Tadhg Byrne was a second row when he first played for Ireland. In 2021, he was the standout 6 in the tournament. People didn't think he had the heft. So people kind of say the same thing about Baird and Shukwu and Thomas Ahern, that they're definitely 6s, but there's nothing that says that they can't grow. Players either.
I also think on that point, you take someone like Tadhg Byrne, he broke through a bit later in his career, similar to how Johnny Sexton broke through a bit later. Gibson Park, as a 9, you're thinking, mid-30s, but he's only been a starter in the second half of his career. Whereas you compare that to, let's say, Robbie Henshaw, who you look at his age on its own, you're going, I wouldn't be too concerned about that, 31, 32. But he broke through as an 18-year-old. So it's about ensuring that these guys are looked after and that they are fresh and in full fitness when they do get their opportunities.
Yeah, well, I was going to keep going. Like, Bundy's 37, but like Jamie Osborne will be 25 at the next World Cup, and he looks like a prime guy for number 12. Gibson Park will be 35, but Craig Casey's only going to be 28. Like, he'll be in his absolute prime then. Jack Conan would be 35, but he's a kind of a bench player at the moment as well. Like, we have Brian Gleeson in there as a training panelist. The only players on the list, Keane, I think, who, like, if they were to retire tomorrow, we'd have a massive problem, is Josh van der Fleer at number 7, because there hasn't been a guy developed there, and maybe James Lowe on the left wing. Now Jacob Stockdale is coming back into form, but Lowe has been such an ever-present and makes so much happen. But I think you can go through the kind of the stark doomsday list and actually be like, well, there's actually a few little things happening that maybe mitigate that. And then you have guys like Keenan, Porter and Ryan who'll all be 31. Like, for me, that's in their physical prime. I know it's in their 30s, but it's not like there's a difference between 31 and 34. Like, is any of that making sense to you?
Yeah, well, Mads makes a great point and literally took the words out of my mouth by using the Tyke Byrne and Jameson Gibson Park examples, because their ages and playing ages, I would agree, are very different. Like, Tyke Byrne didn't play a whole pile of top class rugby until he made the breakthrough with the Scarlets, really. Jameson Gibson Park spent most of the first half of his career being a backup scrum half in Super Rugby. So those guys are a little different to exactly like a Tyke Furlong, a Robbie Henshaw, who, have serious miles on the clock. But to keep on the sort of positive theme, I think the regeneration of the front row has been a huge positive. Like, the fact that we're kind of sitting here, not arguing or debating, but, it's brilliant to see a guy like Paddy McCarthy, and his potential is undoubted, but that a guy like that is now being brought through, because for a while there, when Cian Healy was playing, we're kind of wondering, when he's gone, who's going to be the backup to Andrew Porter? You have a guy like Tom O'Toole, who's been left out of the squad as well. He's been a real favourite of Andy Farrell over the last few years. But look how well Finlay Bealham has done for Connacht, and with Ireland when Tyke Furlong has been absent. Thomas Clarkson has been outstanding every time he's played. He's been brilliant again for Leinster as well. So all of a sudden, you've got the regeneration of the front row. Gus McCarthy, a guy who's come in and looked really good. I think Lee Barron, eventually will prove to be a very good signing for Munster as well. So that looks very healthy to me. I think Cormac Izuchuku, if he'd been fit, would have been nailed on to be in the squad. But now you have a guy like Tom Ahern, who might have been in there as well. He's been very good for Munster as well. So I think once you go through it, Will, there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic. I still think we're stuck on the whole thing. Who is the backup to Josh van der Fleer? It looks like it's Nick Timoney again, but he's kind of filtered in and out of Ireland squads over the last couple of years without, being a favourite of Andy Farrell. I think it's fair to say, to me, the one position that stands out in terms of the profile would be the centres. And I think we probably will see Bundy Aki going down the Johnny Sexton route in terms of the last kind of couple of years with Leinster, that he'll play less and less, I think, for Connacht. I think the goal will be to try and get him to the World Cup. And like Mad says, maybe get, 50 very good minutes out of him. Now, you could argue the merits in going down that route, but when Bundy Aki is fit, he's generally picked by Andy Farrell because he's been such a good player. But I just think there was scope there to maybe bring in, like, as a development player possibly, but a Hugh Gavin, a Jude Postlethwaite, just to bring a bit of fresh blood in there. Like, Stuart McCloskey is there again. Like, you know what you're going to get from him. He's an unbelievably dependable player, but again, a guy who's kind of come in and out of squads over the last years. I just think there was scope maybe to have a younger guy in there as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with Cian on that point, and I think alongside Josh van der Fleer being an area of concern as regards the depth behind them, if Gary Ringrose is unavailable, you look at Stu McCluskey, Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, there isn't a centre partnership there of 12 and 13. We've seen that trialled at different times, and maybe I'd agree with Cian that to potentially have had a look at Hugh Gavin or Jude Postlethwaite, or bring in someone like James Hume.
It'd be Bundy and Robbie, wouldn't it? They played a lot together over the years, going back to the day.
Yeah, and it's not that Robbie can't do a job there. We're talking about winning a World Cup here.
Yeah.
And you need, in my opinion, a certain level of speed and agility at that position, and I think Robbie does a very good job at 12 at this stage of his career, but I would have concerns at 13.
Cian, just on you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just make a point as well? Because the one guy who we haven't mentioned in this conversation, who we certainly should, is Jamie Osborne. Because I agree with you, Will. To me, he looks like a ready-made long-term, even medium-term replacement at 12. But once again, we're heading into November now, where for me, he's the front runner to be starting at fullback in Chicago with Hugo Keenan out injured. I thought he was excellent last weekend against the Sharks. He delivered for Andy Farrell when he picked him in South Africa last year. But this is a guy who, look, he's still very young. And I asked Leo Cullen about it after the match last weekend, and he admitted himself, we're not sure what position he's going to end up in. And because he's such a talented player, I just would hate that if he falls into between two stools in terms of being that centre, sometimes played on the wing, which I definitely don't think is his best position, and then playing at fullback. If he is going to be that long-term 12 for Ireland, is the best thing for him playing at 15 in games like this? Of course, he'll get brilliant experience, but if it's not going to be his long-term position, a part of me wonders, is our succession planning, Ireland's succession planning, is that on point there? Is that I don't know what you think, Mads, is that the best use of Jamie Osborne now, that just as long as he plays, he's fine?
Yeah, look, one thing we can be sure about with Osborne is he's a quality rugby player no matter where he plays. Could we see him at 13 maybe? But I think 12 is probably his best position long term. But you can't form that opinion strongly until you've seen him, playing in different positions. I didn't think wing suited him. Now, albeit against the best wingers in the world, against the French, but even Frawley there, like Frawley's in that squad. He played 13 for Leinster at the weekend. Could we see him get Andy Farrell asking Leo Cullen to play him more at 13 when Gary isn't playing there? But yeah, it's a very interesting one to see how it plays out. But we definitely need to build more depth into those two positions.
Yeah, be interesting to watch over the next couple of weeks and months. We'll move on to Leinster-Munster then, Ian. 5:15 in Croke Park this weekend. Leinster getting their first win of the season against the Sharks, much improved. Had a few lines back. Josh van der Fleer was really sharp. Ronan Kelleher looked really good. We mentioned Jamie Osborne, James Lowe as well. Munster making it 3 from 3 on Friday night against Edinburgh. Another kind of sticky home game. Now, they have rotated a fair bit across the few games, so they haven't had their full team yet. Going into this weekend, then, when we're expecting both teams to be as close to full strength as they can at this point of the season, you think Leinster's breakdown work could be a key advantage for them potentially? I know you were doing it in your analysis video this week. Well, what kind of stands out to you about what they're doing there?
Yeah, I think what's different with Leinster to the other teams in the URC is they don't necessarily target the ball and go for poaches as much as other teams do. They have much more of a focus on counter-rucking and disrupting the opposition's ball. And what that means is it gives their other defending players more time to get set and get off the line. And we see how impactful Leinster's defence is. They put 2 into the tackle, they try and drive you back. And I just think that they're going to suffocate Munster in that area. They're going to make their ball really slow, which is going to leave them with limited options. They're probably going to have to go to their kicking game. If Casey's not available, will the likes of Coughlin be able to put box kicks up that their back three can get up and compete and create breaking ball, and then be able to attack against a disjointed Leinster team? If Munster aren't able to do that, I think it's going to be a long day for them at the weekend. I was very impressed with Leinster's breakdown work at the weekend when we saw them against the Stormers, where they weren't impactful in any part of the game. They were considerably better against the Bulls, and then, albeit against slightly weaker opposition against the Sharks, they got turned over very little. And then when Leinster were in possession, they were really able to impose their game, go through multi-phase, whether it's playing tight, sucking the Sharks defenders in, and then once they've done that, moving the ball to width with really efficient, accurate passing.
And is that personnel around the breakdown, like you have Furlong back, smashing rucks, Ronan Kelleher, Josh van der Fleer, like is that kind of what's driving it? Or
yeah, like better personnel, they make better decisions. So whether to poach the ball, whether to just get back into the defensive line, whether to counter ruck, and they're typically better athletes as well. So they're more impactful in the tackle, how they're driving players back. It doesn't seem like, you look at one instance of it, it doesn't seem like, oh, that's why Leinster are winning games. But if you're putting that together 100 times in a game, that's what results in really putting the opposition under maximum pressure.
Yeah, Keane, I know you were at the Aviva last weekend for the Sharks game, and it was like, look, it wasn't away in South Africa, like the first 2 weeks, and Leinster had stronger personnel, as we mentioned, but they did look a lot sharper. Even some of the guys who had played in South Africa looked a lot better. I'm not sure if that's just, it was an easier, it's an easier set of circumstances to play, or if it's just kind of getting your eye in after 3 weeks versus 1 and 2 weeks. But what did you make of the performance? And like, the vibes seem a lot healthier around the team than they did after 2 weeks.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a combination, Will, of all those factors. I also think the Sharks were very poor, unbelievably indisciplined. Um, God, if you were a Shark supporter, you'd be tearing your hair out with the quality that they have. So I thought they made life a little easier for Leinster. Obviously, when you plug, was it 5 Lions back into the team, like they instantly looked better. And obviously they've done a good preseason, because I thought each of the five of them were excellent. As much as the victory was kind of predicated on the quality coming back in, I thought we've just been praising Paddy McCarthy. I thought he was outstanding, and I thought Fintan Gunn as well, two of the younger guys on the team, pair of 22-year-olds. I thought they were outstanding. And Leinster do this very well, and you'll know it from your time there as well, Mads. They tend to pair younger players with experienced guys, and it worked. Like, look, it's not rocket science. Like, it's a very smart strategy, and it works very well. So, like, let's go to Paddy McCarthy, starting him in a front row with Ronan Kelleher and Tyg Furlong. Now, he was outstanding in his own right, but imagine the confidence that he gets when he's packing down into a scrum and having those two guys alongside him. That was obviously very smart. And obviously there was more quality and experience in the backline that you had Fintan Gunn. And I think that's a big decision for Leo Cullen this weekend. Obviously Jameson Gibson-Park is going to come back and he's going to start, but who's on the bench? Is it going to be Luke McGrath, who brilliant player for Leinster, but do you start maybe looking towards the future with Fintan Gunn, who undoubtedly is, and he's another guy I think who could have been arguably in the Ireland squad as a development player. We didn't mention the A game that's going to be on November 8th, and the squad for that will be announced next week, but he's a guy I'd say he'll be eyeing up that game as a chance to get in. So as much as the younger players as much as the experienced players made a big difference, I was really impressed with those two guys in particular. And Mads is so right about the breakdown. Like, it's been a big part of Jacques Nienarber's philosophy, hasn't it, Mads? Like, since he's come in, I think the Leinster players speak about making it a shit fight, making the breakdown an absolute nuisance, whether it's barging or just flooding lads in. And that's something that Munster are going to have to be prepared for, because since Clayton McMillan has come in, he's spoken so much about, bringing more of an edge. That's the kind of stuff that he's talking about. We haven't quite seen it yet, I don't think, in the first 3 games, certainly in terms of what he's looking for. But if they're not prepared for that shit fight, for want of a better term, at the breakdown, the maul, the scrum, they're going to be in big trouble, because as ever on paper, when you look at the probable packs that are going to be lining up, like, Leinster have a distinct advantage, particularly with the guys who are going to come back in on the back of the 5 Lions last weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned Fintan Gunn there. Like, it was a nice combination between the veterans and the youngsters for Josh Van Fleury's try. Gunn's beautiful pass, Paddy McCarthy kind of fixing a defender with a nice kind of short line, and the try was scored. You mentioned nuisance, Keane, and I could put this one to you, Ian. Someone I've been very impressed with, and even in South Africa, was Alex Soroka as well. He has kind of like a meanness about him, and I mean that in a positive way, like kind of a schoolyard bully kind of mentality, I feel like. And he's a real physical player. He makes a nuisance of himself at the breakdown. He's a line-out option. I think he's really stood up the first 2 weeks. And like, number 6, Ryan Baird has started there. I don't know if he's had the best start to the season. Like, I'd like to see Alex Soroka get an opportunity as a young guy who went to South Africa, who put his hand up and maybe played well. I don't know what you've made of him over the first couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with him. I think the new mould of 6, you do spend a lot more time in the wider channels. He made a break at the start of the game, had the confidence to drop it on his foot and kick it through. It just shows
maybe too much confidence.
I don't mind. It's the Leinster way. He impressed me, and I think for Leinster, it's really important that they build out that mid-tier in their squad. We spoke a few weeks ago about having a 2-tiered squad. Obviously, the top tier being internationals or Lions players. And it's really important that the guys like Soraka step up, and in fairness to Leo Cullen, he rewards guys like Soraka. We saw it with Max Deegan last year when he played particularly well, and that Sharks away win, he then got rewarded with opportunities at the tail end of the season. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Soraka involved again this week. He it's not like he's a complete bolter out of nowhere. He has been in this Leinster squad for I think 3 or 4 years now. He's played plenty in the AIL, and he's so far above that level now. And yeah, if he can find form, he can definitely be someone who puts his hand up for Irish selection come the Six Nations.
He just really caught my eye the last couple of weeks, I must say. Harry Byrne then, obviously Sam Prendergast, first 2 weeks, got the start. Everyone was very interested to see how he'd build into the new season. It was tough for Leinster. It was pretty tough for him as well. Harry Byrne gets the opportunity. Bernard Jackman gave him man of the match, which I think he just did that just a little bit of spice into everyone's discussions about out half. But you were talking about him a bit earlier. Like, how do you think he played at the weekend, and what do you think that performance does, just in terms of upsetting the apple cart, maybe what the selection might have been over the next couple of weeks? It's probably Sam Prendergast, definitely, I would say, this Saturday, but it's a long season.
Yeah, first off, it impressed me with Harry's bravery to move away from Leinster and take that opportunity with Bristol for the second half of last season, and he played really well in the Premiership. Bristol were keen to hold on to him. But he wanted to come back and compete against Prendergast, and he wants to be Leinster's first choice, and he wants to be Ireland's first choice, and he has the skill set to do it. He's a big, strong guy. We saw at the weekend an area of his game that impressed me was his defence. He gets his body in front of the opposition really well. His passing game is up there with the very best out halves in the world. And he's well able to challenge the line himself. He's got a good show and go. It's not like the defensive team can disregard him and drift off him. You have to stay focused on him, and that has a knock-on effect with creating more space for the centres and wingers outside him. It's one very good performance. He's closed the gap on Prendergast, but he's going to need more of those, and he's someone whose time has just ran out for getting selected for the November internationals, but I'd imagine he'll probably be on the bench this weekend. Can he close the gap further?
It's funny because in some ways it's no harm that he wasn't picked, because he would have been the third choice out half. He wouldn't have probably played much. He gets the next, so Leinster will be having another match when none of the internationals are playing. He'll start that. I think they're at home to Zebra, if I'm not mistaken. He'll probably look good in that, I think it's fair to say. Yeah. And it was a nicely timed performance, because then, depending on how things shake out in November, we have a 7-match block of games, 2 Champions Cup, 3 Interpros, 2 Champions Cup before the Six Nations, where if he has another good game next weekend, he'll be really well primed for later in the season.
The challenge for Harry, like he has a phenomenal skill set, and he can do the amazing, but it's when things don't go well that it doesn't fall below average. And even at the weekend, we saw he went for a pretty audacious pass around the halfway line, one that you would typically see an out half go for when the team has penalty advantage, and you can throw caution to the wind. Look, at the same time, Leinster were 21-0 up on the game, but you do not want to give the team an opportunity to come back into the game, and he needs to cut that part out of his game, especially with international rugby, where you just can't afford mistakes like that. But he's really exciting to watch, and I'm certainly a big fan of his.
Yeah, the pass is a good point. You look back to last November, Kieran Frawley comes off the bench against the All Blacks, doesn't play well, obviously, and then he gets an opportunity against Fiji. Let's come back into it. He threw a few poor passes that day, not quite as audacious maybe as Harry Burns, but a couple of ones that didn't go to hand where there was tries on. I remember I kind of cut to him and he was kind of like laughing at his mistake, and a few people were like, maybe he's not as switched on as he should be. But so I take your point completely around that. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch it develop.
Yeah, and Frawley falls into that category for me as well, where he'll throw a wild pass, and if I'm watching on TV, I'll rewind and go, I wonder what he was seeing here. Was it on? And too often I'm thinking that was too low percentage. I didn't think it was particularly on anyway, as opposed to it being on and maybe the skill execution being what was letting him down. But they're two young guys as well. They're going to learn, and sometimes learning the hard way is the best way.
Keane, I know you were chatting to Harry Byrne a bit after the game. You're just going to come in there.
Yeah, I think you both make very good points. Firstly, Mad's point about like the bravery to go on loan last season. I'd love to see more of that in Irish rugby. Just as a little side point, look how successful that's worked out. Sending a young out half over to work under a coach like Pat Lam, who, Harry Byrne spoke about this when we were chatting to him after the match, like just gave him like new ideas that he's bringing back into the Leinster picture. I'm not saying it's going to work for every guys, and obviously you want to hold on to the best talent, and that's the MO of the IRFU, but maybe being a little more lenient. Like, wasn't there talk that Ronan O'Gara was trying to sign Matthew Devine ahead of this season from Connacht as well? And like Connacht obviously want to hold on to him, but you want to see more of these guys playing if the Irish provinces are going to hold on to them. So I think that was a good point. And I think your point, Will, about it's no harm for him not to be named in the squad this time around. I think that sends out a good message, because like if we're judging him on one game again against a poor enough Sharks team, I'm not. Yeah, I just think that sends out mixed messages to other guys who've been, breaking their asses for the last few months within the system. Now that said, Andy Farrell is, and I think still is, a big fan of Harry Byrne. One image that's sort of ingrained in my mind is that on the 22 summer tour to New Zealand, we arrived at the first training session that we were allowed go to on the outskirts of Auckland. And we walked in, and the however many players, 30 odd players, were all training, and Harry Byrne was standing on the sideline, not togged out, looked absolutely dejected. So his tour was basically over before it started. He was due to play in the first Maori game, and obviously he was going to play the second Maori game as well. And obviously didn't get to play them at all. The sand sort of shifted there because Kieran Frawley got in, and all of a sudden he was then ahead of Harry Byrne when he went back to Leinster. But the picture at Leinster has changed drastically since Harry Byrne went on loan to Bristol at the end of last season, because his brother is now gone. That must have been a strange enough dynamic, competing with your brother for the same jersey. They're best friends. Weird enough, I'd imagine. He's now, you'd probably imagine, ahead of Kieran Frawley in terms of being Leinster's backup 10, because Leo Cullen and Andy Farrell don't seem to have seen that picture the same as we've discussed with Luke Will ad nauseum about Kieran Frawley, that he just hasn't really gotten a prolonged spell at 10. Again, like this season, we're seeing him playing at 12. So I think now Harry Byrne is going in as Sam Prendergast's backup. And you're right, maybe he'll get a few games over the next few weeks, and he can force his way in by the end of the month. But I think one game is not enough for a guy to all of a sudden be parachuted back into the Ireland squad as well as he played. And I do agree with you. I don't know if I'd given him man of the match. I think I probably would have given it to someone like Josh Van der Fleer.
I just admired Bernard Jackman's gumption and giving it to him just to kick off a big debate. But one thing I did find interesting is there was a soundbite from Andy Farrell. I think it was in the Joe interview, but it might have been. And he mentioned Harry Byrne by name,
and that's not by accident.
That's not, well. But see, I thought he was in the squad when I listened to that, because he said, "Oh, Sam Prendergast, Jack Crowley, Harry Byrne." So he obviously saw that performance. As you say, Keane, probably a little premature to pick him in the squad. Maybe he already had plans in place, and Frawley maybe covers more positions. But you can guarantee from that little slip, whether it was intentional or not, that it caught his eye. So be very interested to see how Harry Byrne goes over the next few weeks, and staying fit is key. But we've seen with Tommy O'Brien, just because you've had a load of injuries in the past does not mean you'll always be bitten by the injury bug. So hopefully for both of those guys, they can stay fit going forward. Cian, so where are Munster going into this game then? As I mentioned, they're 3 wins out of 3, 2 home wins in a row against Cardiff and Edinburgh by a single point. Different teams, though. There was 10 changes from Cardiff to Edinburgh, and obviously Craig Casey only played in week 1. Looks like he'll be out, who's a big loss. So hard to know exactly where they're at. Obviously Clayton McMillan is still finding his feet. We do have Mike Prendergast and Dennis Leamy in situ in attack and defence, so we kind of know what we're getting to some degree there, and maybe Clayton McMillan's influence will be more in terms of the mentality and the culture at this point. But what are you expecting to see from them in Croke Park on Saturday?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see drastic changes just because Clayton McMillan has come in as head coach, because he's working with the existing coaches. When I was down in Cork 2 weeks ago, chatting to their CEO, Ian Flanagan, who told us that when Munster went to the market for a new head coach, one of the parameters that they were working within was finding a head coach who would be willing to come in and work within an existing framework. Now, it's obviously unusual. Most head coaches will, they'll have their own guys that they'll want to bring in, but Munster wanted obviously to keep Dennis Leamy, Mike Prendergast, Mossy Lawler, Alex Codling, they were in the process of tying down from the IRFU after the Women's World Cup. So I would imagine that narrows down the search in terms of head coaches who'd be willing to come in and work with guys who realistically they don't know at all. So when you factor that in, I don't think Tate McMillan was going to come in and rip up the script. And that's what we've seen in the opening 3 games. Now, I think winning ugly is a good habit to be in. You don't want to be doing it every weekend. And something that we were discussing a couple of weeks ago, Mads, as well, was that the motto during preseason was just find a way. It was something that Jack O'Donoghue was telling us in terms of like the swimming, the hill running. We've talked about this at length, just find a way. And I think in the last 2 weeks against Cardiff and Edinburgh, that's exactly what they've done. They found a way to win. Now, they're going to have to go up several notches this weekend going to Croke Park. They'll have a couple of guys back. Craig Casey, I think, is a massive loss. I think the step down to Ethan Coughlin and Paddy Patterson, I think, is quite stark, if I'm being honest. I thought Paddy Patterson had a couple of good moments last weekend against Edinburgh, and Ethan Coughlin did well when he came on. But to me, Munster look very light there without Craig Casey, and I think they've left themselves a little bit short. Obviously, Conor Murray retiring. I wonder if they had their time over again, could they have come to some agreement with Conor Murray staying on for another season? I think Jack Crowley is in the exact same boat. I think Munster are just so reliant on Crowley and Casey, 2 excellent players. I think when you go beyond that, the depth chart looks a little light. But look, it doesn't matter if you're going to have prime Ian Madigan or prime Johnny Sexton playing out half this weekend. If the pack doesn't, get parity at least, I don't think it will make any odds. And that to me would be the biggest concern from a Munster point of view. We've already discussed about the breakdown, but the scrum as well. Ollie Yeager sounds like he's going to be out injured. It looks like John Ryan is going to start. That's a big loss. I thought Ollie Yeager had started the season quite well. Good to see Edwin Adogbo coming back last week, but I don't know, will Munster throw him in? I could look very silly. People might have seen the Munster team by the time they listen to this, but would they really throw a Dogbo in to start in a game like this, having been out for so long, as well as he did for the 15 minutes or whatever it was off the bench? You put Tyke Byrne back in, he'll make a difference, but I think without, there's no John Hodnett, no Alex Kendellen. So what do you do at 7 there? Does Jack O'Donoghue play there? Does Ruan Quinn, a very young guy who I think there's a lot of excitement in Munster about, but has had a tricky enough, I would say, couple of weeks for Munster. Does Brian Gleeson start? Does Gavin Coombs start? So they have a couple of options there. But when you think about Leinster, maybe bringing back James Ryan, maybe bringing back Jack Conan, as well as Tyke Furlong from last week. Dan Sheehan is going to come back this week as well. That's a lot of quality to bring back into the team. And that would be my big concern. Look, as it has been, I think, for the last few seasons when it comes to Munster-Leinster games.
Yeah, Brian Gleeson and Dogbo, I agree with you. I could see them more maybe being bench impact, which to be fair, would be no harm in that, having two real powerful guys. Ian, where do you see Munster at this moment in time? I read it out earlier. I think Leinster have won 14 of the last 16 games, and the 2 Munster wins in that time, the URC semi-final and a Rainbow Cup game, were games where Leinster had heavily rotated their squad. So you're going back to that Stevens Day game when Finian Wycherley got under Johnny Sexton's skin. I think that was Stevens Day in 2018 or around Christmas 2018. So you're going back a long time when Munster have beaten that kind of a locked and loaded Leinster like we'll see this Saturday. Any pathway you see Munster being able to really get at Leinster and spring a surprise?
Yeah, I think McMillan has come in and he's trying to really build a strong foundation to Munster's game. I thought it was interesting after the Edinburgh game and the press conference that he was speaking, and look, he was clearly happy that they'd won. They'd found a way to win, something that they didn't actually do last year. They were losing those kind of arm wrestle games against mid-table teams like Edinburgh and Cardiff last season, but they found a way to win. That will have pleased him. The point that stood out that he said was, we went away from going under and through the opposition, and we were trying to go around and over them. So that tells you that he's clearly hammering home that we need to win the physical contest to be able to play our game. And if you're not winning that physical contest, it doesn't matter what shape you're playing and what your back 3 guys are doing. And they've struggled to do that in those games. They were genuine arm wrestles. Now, full credit, Edinburgh actually had a really good side out, lots of powerful guys in that team. Cardiff are good this year. They're a good side, and they're by far and away the best Welsh side in my opinion this season. So he'll be. I don't think I'd agree with Cian. I don't think he's going to be looking to reinvent the wheel. But what he will have is a clear plan, and he'll want the team to follow that. Now, whether that's good enough to get them over the line and win the game, but he'll want them to be really competitive in the areas that they can control at the breakdown, in the contact and the physical battle. I think you've got to go aerial against Leinster and create an aerial contest. Because if you can do that and do that well, then you're in with a chance, because you're then attacking against a disjointed Leinster defence. But it's going to be a challenge for them. Leinster are going to have a star-studded team back. You've name-checked it, the likes of Sheehan and stuff coming back fit. We saw how well they integrated into the team last week. But it is it's an amazing fixture. I love it, and it was my favourite fixture to play in as a player. But like any rivalry, a genuine rivalry needs teams to win and lose and win and lose. Like the Bulls and Leinster, that's a genuine rivalry now because they're beating each other every other time. Munster need to win either at this weekend or they need to win at Christmas time for this to still be the best club rivalry in world rugby.
Yeah, it's mad that Leinster have won 6 in a row at Thomond Park. It's kind of, obviously this is the Croke Park game and we're not focusing on the Christmas time game, but that is quite stark as well. I'm almost loath to bring it up, but we've gone 50 minutes without a kind of a Crowley-Prendergast chat, but it's the first time they're going head to head, so it actually, there actually is a very newness to this part of the discussion. We haven't actually seen them go up against each other. I know it's not literally like you're going against them because there's the forward pack maybe dictates out your ball, but it will be very intriguing to see who has the edge there.
Yeah, and you'd love to see an iconic moment of, Crowley going for a show go and eyeing up Prendergast. And full credit to Crowley. He did it to Harry Byrne in that semi-final. I remember him, I think it was a long kick by Leinster. He eyed up Harry Byrne in that defensive line. He took him on and effectively ran over him. And that definitely stunted Harry's growth. You're right in saying it's not a true comparison. They're not driving the same car. You're behind a pack full of Leinster players. Full of Lions players. You've got one of the best scrum halves in Gibson Park. Crowley's going to be most likely not working with Casey, which is a big blow for him. But how these guys control the games, what's really impressed me with Crowley in the 2 games that he's played is how he's plotted his way through the matches, as opposed to playing phase to phase. He's clearly thinking 2-3 phases ahead. He's getting players around him onto the same page, something that I thought was a work on for him last year. And yeah, I'm intrigued to see how it plays out. Prendergast has had a challenging start to the season, albeit against, in my view, the 2 best teams outside of Leinster in the URC and playing them away from home. He still did a lot of things well in those games, and he will be relishing the fact that he is being not written off but questioned. And I'm expecting him to step up this weekend and have a huge performance.
Yeah, Cian, anything about the Prendergast-Crowley duel particularly catching your eye?
I just hope it doesn't turn nasty online. That's my big, regardless of what happens, that everyone can just enjoy it for what it is, because it is exciting. I just think at times last year it just turned toxic. On the summer tour, I was chatting to Cian Prendergast, obviously Sam's brother, and he was just giving a bit of insight into some of the stuff that he had to put up with. So I just hope that it doesn't go down that route, but it is.
It definitely will, Cian. Sorry to break it to you. It 100% will. This. I don't know what idealized version of life you're living. It's 2025. It's like Mad Max here. It's way past that.
Maybe if we stay off social media and actually live in the real world, it's not as bad in the real world, I don't think. But anyway, yeah, you're probably right, Will. Wishful thinking, but anyone who says they're not excited, and I know some people are fed up of listening to the Prendergast Crowley thing, but the fact they're going head to head, we hope this weekend, because let's not forget what happened last year at Thomond Park. The fact that they're going head to head, I think, is genuinely very exciting. And just away from the kind of the head-to-head, I think Prendergast kicking is going to be really important. Look, stating the obvious as a 10, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts, Mads, on what you think it is. But Munster's defence has been a bit leaky, I think, in the early stages of the season. They've really been hurt out wide. I think of the joy to Callum Sheedy, who was outstanding, by the way, just a little side point for Cardiff, in terms of setting up Tom Bowen and Josh Adams for for their tries in Thomond Park. Edinburgh got a bit of joy out wide as well. And it was something that I noticed last season was that I don't know, has Dennis Leamy tweaked the defensive system? It seems to me that last season they added a bit more line speed. And I think what I've seen this season is that they're coming up hard and they're coming up in, but it's leaving spaces on the edges that clearly teams have spotted in their previews because it's been blatantly obvious. Now, we've discussed at the top of the show that Calvin Nash is obviously out injured now, which we didn't realise. So what do Munster do in their back three? I would say Mike Haley is pretty nailed on at 15. I would imagine that they would plug Shane Daly straight into that right wing spot. Andrew Smith is another option, but I think Shane Daly might get the nod there. And you have the bit of X factor in Takir Abrahams on the other wing, who's been very good as well. But I think that's something their defence out wide that they're going to have to get right, because you can be sure that if Cardiff spotted it, if Edinburgh spotted it, Leinster will have spotted it. And I think Gibson Park and Sam Prendergast, I think that's an area that they'll look to get after him as well. Because I think Mads is right. I think Munster will look to get after Leinster in the air to try and make it a scrap, to win the second ball on them and cause a bit of chaos within their back three. But I think equally, as I said, I'd be curious to get your take on it, Mads. Have you noticed that maybe Munster have been a little bit vulnerable out wide on the edges?
Yeah, the reason I think they've been vulnerable is because they haven't been necessarily winning the contact battle and slowing the opposition's ball down. If you want to play with a high tail and getting your, traditionally your number 13 and your winger up high into the defensive line, you need to do it with your interior defence set and getting off the line and putting the ball players under pressure and passing the ball early. If the attacking team is able to play on top of you and take on that interior defence and dictate to them, you're going to get exposed in those wide channels. So for Munster, they've got to win that physical contest closer to the breakdown, slow the Leinster ball down, and then they need to know when to get up off the line hard. You can't just do it every time, because then you're showing your hand to the Leinster attack, and they've good enough players to be able to pick you off. But we saw, I think it was 2 years ago when Munster played Leinster in the Aviva, and they played some really nice rugby, and they scored a brilliant try starting off the game in the top right hand corner.
Casey in the corner.
Yeah, that was like such a great try, because they were able to get that quick ruck ball on the inside. Leinster are retreating, they get caught short in the wide channels, and Munster are able to pick them off. They haven't quite been able to do that this season. But look, the likes of Tygburn coming back in will help that.
Yeah, just because to Keane's point about just their leaky defence, they conceded 10 tries in the first 3 games to the Scarlets, Cardiff and Edinburgh. Team, you might be saying that Cardiff are the best Welsh team and Edinburgh played well, but they're not the big hitters of the league, and like 10 tries in those 3 matches is a decent amount.
Yeah, I'd look at the tries individually. I think Sheedy's ones in particular, it's not like your defensive system has let you down.
Yeah.
He's finding kick space there that a lot of out halves simply won't have the ability to do. But they're also off the back of sustained pressure. They've ended up close to the Munster try line, and they've got penalty advantage, which gives them the luxury of going for those kind of lower percentage plays. The other area that fascinates me with the two tens is place kicking. I'm not sure what their exact percentages were last year, but I'd be surprised if either of them was above 70%. And Crowley, I know it was very windy conditions in that game against Cardiff, but he's missed, and some of the misses didn't impress me, as in the ball flight of the ball, or missing left and then missing right. And then Prendergast had an important kick to potentially get a bonus point at the end of the Sharks game, at the end of the Bulls game. I'm not too sure if this game will come down to place kicking, but it will come down to it in the Six Nations when you're playing the likes of France away and England away, and you won't necessarily have the luxury of beating teams by scoring tries.
Who's the better place kicker?
I'm not too sure.
For what you're looking at in the mechanics, even, or like not necessarily looking at the I suppose the accuracy, just from what you see as a kicker.
I'd look at them both and think they should both be excellent place kickers, because they can do harder kicks out of hand particularly well. They both line kick well. They're very good at restarting, whether it's 22 goal line or halfway restarts. They both spiral the ball really well, which we don't see many tens doing. I think Crowley had a few very nice ones in that Cardiff game, in particular at the end, where it was really a kick battle which actually dictated who won and lost the game. So I personally would like to see them changing tee. I said it last year, just go to a higher tee and more of a sweeping motion. I think until they figure out what their miss is and being able to block that out, they're still going to be kind of 70% goal kickers.
Yeah, could come down to that on Saturday. That whets the appetite nicely, not only for this Saturday, but for the November tests and all the serious rugby to come over the next couple of weeks. I'd like to thank Ian and Keane for joining me, and all you for listening. We'll be back on Monday to review all the weekend's action. Until then, see you later.